Hey ratbags, it's Jade. Today giving you a lowdown on what to expect with Smalland. It's been in early access just close to a year, and obviously I've covered and played it a lot. In fact, a huge amount. I've completed every update that added new content, and of course I've covered it for a long time beforehand. But obviously Xbox and PlayStation fans, you're about to play it for the first time on the 15th, so here's a lowdown of what to expect. What kind of game, what kind of things will you be doing? There is a substantial update incoming with the 1.0 release. That's what Steam players will be looking forward to. But this video will be explicitly explaining what to expect, minus maybe some of the new systems which I'll talk about towards the end, which will be coming with the console launch and 1.0. So leave a like if you find it useful, check out the rest of my Smalland guides already if you want to get more of a heads up, and of course I'll be doing brand new fresh ones, showing console gameplay as well. Let's go. So you are the Smallanders, or the small folk. You've basically been underground for a long time, in fact probably hundreds of years, where humans have pretty much died out. It's never fully explained, as far as I know, until maybe 1.0 we might find more lore, but they are kaput. We only have the remnants of their houses, their playgrounds, cars, and some of the infrastructure like roads. So it's our turn to maybe retake the land. Smalland is very sandboxy. It often gets compared to something like Grounded, which Grounded has got a lot more RPG nature to it, even though it is a fantastic survival game on its own as well. But Smalland is definitely more akin to something like Ark or Conan Exiles in my opinion. You'll be equipping and crafting obviously your weapons, and then going out and venturing, trying to take on bugs, building up your base and trying to survive. You've got your health, your stamina, your nourishment and temperature, and that can have a big effect because there are seasons and storms. So when it gets rainy, you might have to take cover because it could potentially be doing damage to you, and likewise you have to be careful of the cold or maybe being too hot. A big focus of Smalland is the armours that you craft. These help negate some of them negative effects from the cold and warm, and it's really the focus. You need the armour sets to really do a better job of taking on some of the enemies, and that is really what you'd be looking for. NPCs that sell the items you need or the recipes to craft your own armours. There is a story. It's not so sandboxed that it's really left to your own devices. You will find certain pieces of lore, and the NPCs fill you in on a little backstory. The idea is that you're meant to be finding some sort of potion to heal your queen, and you're following the footsteps of some of the other Smalland folk that have gone to explore and maybe possibly have the recipe or the items needed. So to get prepared, you'll have to craft a whole bunch of different weapons. Weapons have different damage types, so hammers are going to do pretty much blunt damage, maybe blades, knives will do sharp or slashing damage, arrows, bows and pickaxes will do piercing. The creatures you face will all have their own weaknesses against some of these damage types or strengths. Much like other survival games, when you die you have to go and get your stuff back. Although there are lots of settings being added to Smalland during early access that you can customise whether or not you keep your gear when you die or not, as well as give you the ability to boost resources and a whole host of options to make the game either easier or harder. The tutorial for the game is pretty succinct. It will guide you to pretty much where you need to go. You're not often left frustrated or not realising what you need to craft or where you need to go next, but it does leave you maybe still at that sandbox stage where you can go and explore and just ignore the story for the most part. It's still going to tie in if you do come across an NPC or an area that you might need later on. Of course, one of the best features about Smalland is its base building. There are some really nice tile sets. The basics in your first few days are going to be much what you're used to seeing, twig style buildings, not very strong looking, but as you progress further you'll be able to unlock major tiers that can really shape, and the building style itself is really unique. You can see from my 100 days of Smalland, the building features are really distinct. It might seem a bit basic, like nothing you've not seen in Ark or Conan etc, but it does allow you to turn a lot of the pieces on different axes, so you can come up with some really unique stuff. I'm not that actually clever or inspired enough to make something really outstanding, but I've seen so many creations from the Smalland community just making some epic stuff. And yeah, the best feature is you do all of this in your base, in your tree. You can base build anywhere, but you're susceptible to storm damage and creatures may be attacking. There are save points though. There are 10 trees scattered across the Smalland map, and these are safe from harm. You don't get attacked by any creatures here, the storms don't necessarily do as much damage to your bases, and effectively you can take your base and transfer it from one tree to the other. These 10 trees are scattered out amongst the major starting zone, so if you do want to spend more time in the swamp, then you can take your tree and just move it to the closest one over pretty much. These are fixed locations, and yeah, you just simply transport your whole base. Sometimes there's a few issues, but that have all been ironed out during early access. The only thing that's not been added is more trees around the world. They've added different biomes to the game during its early access, so like a desert themed biome, a more tropical biome, ruins biome, but they haven't added any more trees to these locations, so you still have to do a fair bit of travel. The reason being, they've kind of gated it with needing certain creatures to help you or finding certain quests to unlock tunnels to lead to some of these, just to stop people from sailing right through to the end. There's plenty to do in the starting zones, but for sure you do need to complete some of the quest lines if you want to access some more of the major biomes. But the build pieces themselves are all very nice. They've added some functional decoration, and yeah, like I said, the different tile sets are really cool, all the way up from wood to stone to metal. Of course, the big feature that a lot of people will be hoping is good is the combat. It's interesting enough, and certainly it's not the worst I've played. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the best either though. You can jump around and avoid enemies by dodging, and you can also roll and parry perfectly to get extra damage on creatures. But it's not Dark Souls, even if it wants to kind of try to be. It's solid enough and on par with a lot of other survival games you might have played, but I wouldn't say it's Smalland's strongest feature. Lots of different bugs will have different statuses they apply to you, although a lot do rely on poison. And it has been a bit of a shame that we haven't seen more elementals added or kind of different ways to debuff characters. You'll be eating a lot of foods to give yourself as much HP as possible, and then giving yourself as much health with potions and stamina regeneration too. Different armor sets will lend themselves to different types of playstyle. If you want to be more ranged, if you want to go in with blunt weapons or maybe sharp quick weapons. And a big major change they made during the access was being able to apply wings to any armor set. Previously only used to be a couple sets that you would get, but now you can pretty much unlock wings and apply them to any armor. You do also get access to a grapple hook, but it's kind of useless once you get the wings. And again, you'll be going around to these NPCs and buying out all of these armors to hopefully get you to progress as they go up succinctly to give you more health and more stamina and stuff to take on harder foes. The bugs themselves and creatures I think are great. The models are really realistic. There's not really cartoony stuff going on here like maybe in Grounded. They scuttle around and they're very similar to games like Conan or Ark, the way they move and you'll interact with them, with each zone having maybe difficult or tougher enemies to face off against and making sure that you'll need the right weapon for the right job. You'll be utilising their bug parts a lot to craft these armours obviously. When it comes to taming the creatures, there aren't as many as you would maybe expect. There's lots and lots of bugs, but only a few of them you can actually tame and ride and mount. Some of them become pretty obsolete as well once you get a late game creature. But things like grasshoppers will allow you to jump further and go a little bit faster, but their stamina drains quite a bit. A new system they did add during the early access, which is the XP system. You will gain XP for doing more standard stuff, killing creatures, gathering resources or crafting. And so do your pets. So they are different tiers of creatures. Again, something they changed. You will find creatures much tougher than others, even though they're the same type. And so you have to make sure that you're leveled up maybe to take your creature to do combat against them if you haven't got decent enough armor or weapons. As you gain XP levels, you can then put it into attribute points to increase their strength, maybe their health, their stamina. You get the idea. And that obviously goes for you as well. And of course, if they do get ambushed by a whole host of angry carpenter ants like this, then there is a risk that they may get killed, and there's no actually bring them back to life. You'll have to go and tame a brand new one. So you have to know when to fight or flight in this game for sure if you don't want to lose your favourite tames. The tames all have to be pretty much beaten into submission, and then you feed them their favourite treat. These favourite treats you only get the recipes for once you've defeated certain bosses. So you won't necessarily be flying around on a creature on day one. You are gonna progressively get through the game, and as you go through you'll get access to better tames. In that respect, it's not like Ark, maybe definitely much more like Conan Exiles, which only more recently added the ability to have actual tames and ridables. Some creatures like the ladybug you'll be able to utilise for storage, and they'll take more around as they follow you. But once you start getting to the mid to late game, you'll realise that some creatures are ridiculously OP and will really help you get across the map. So there's no fast travel points other than the ability to move your base from tree to tree. So some of the creatures become really vital in getting to some of the further biomes. Some of the NPCs will have quests that you have to also do before you can get access to tames, like finding lots of chess pieces in the Forbidden Zone. These areas are more advanced, and this is some of the places you won't be able to access until you've completed other biomes, but they offer a lot more varied gameplay. You'll be taking on much harder and difficult creatures, and yeah, collecting and exploring the realm. You'll also come across other Smalland folk. Some Smalland people have been up on the surface for a long time, and these are pretty much different factions. That's another aspect as well. It seems like there's a new faction system incoming for Smalland with the 1.0 release. While I can't talk about it too much just yet, I'm going to give you a rundown when the game's here. But this will give you the ability to buy and unlock new recipes and more further items from each NPC, depending on what you've been doing in certain areas and against certain creatures. So I'm really curious to see and talk about how this affects the rest of the game. Smalland is meant to be receiving more updates after 1.0, where we're hopefully going to see more creatures, more buildables, and some of the stuff that hasn't actually made it during its early access, which was spoken a lot about that would be coming. And that at its heart is the gameplay loops. You go out there, you do the basics of survival, build a little base in a safe environment in a tree if you want, or you can try building bases down on the ground. You unlock the potential to get better armor and weapons, which will then give you the opportunity to hopefully get tameable creatures. You'll have to fight and kill bosses to progress and unlock new biomes, as well as get the treats needed to tame even better creatures. Unlock new armor, get new weapons, and unlock new things and build tiers. You can of course play with up to 10 of your friends on the same world, but it doesn't really have any fancy features where you can play if someone goes offline, unless you go ahead and rent a server. There hasn't been too much wording on how that's going to work with console just yet, but I presume it's going to be something similar to Ark or DayZ, where you'll be able to rent one via the Trado or other websites. So no, you cannot have a server that runs forever. If you and your friends want to play together continuously on a world, then you will have to rent a server out. But genuinely, I think this game doesn't need that. Your friends can come and join you with their base on their tree in your world. So there's no real need to have a persistent server. When you want to join up and do something, take on a boss together, you both get rewards from it. You can come and help get resources for your friend, knowing that you're going to get XP and you'll be able to help out and take some of the resources back to your base. As long as you've got a spare tree in your world, your friends will occupy that space with their base. Absolutely one of the better and probably best features of Smalland is that ability. I think it's great. I don't think we always need to be able to rent a server to play with friends, and this is much better than just having to rely on your friend always being online to go and further progress. You can go off and do your own stuff, join up with your friend's world, do stuff together, and then carry on going and doing your own stuff. All the while the world turns, you have seasons which you can adjust the length of, giving more difficulty in the cold, although again it is a bit underbaked. It just makes you more colder, which you'll have to eat maybe foods or craft or wear certain armour, but that's about it. I'm hoping the 1.0 release will have changed this and made maybe resources more hard to get in winter and maybe more bountiful in summer, but I've got a feeling no. Seasonal changes are just quite superficial. They can make the world look different for sure, but don't really offer much in terms of changing the gameplay once you've learned how to cook some food that will warm you up. Lots of the blogs before the game release showed that water would freeze and you'd be able to access areas that you couldn't before, but again that hasn't been implemented during early access. But not many games do have these types of seasons, so at least they've got this, and it does make the world feel a bit more fresh and unique. You've got biomes like the swamp where you'll face off against more spiders, you've got the forgotten ruins where you come across bigger beetles and lizards, the desert filled with scorpions and snakes, and a new watchtower biome which seemingly has a lot more of extra small folk, rival clans that you'll have to take on. As I said, I'll be here with fresh guides, but absolutely go and check out some of my older stuff as a lot of it is still very relevant. And look out for a revamped 100 days with all the added updates on top of the first one I did. Until next time and the release of Smalland on console, where I'll be giving my first impressions and review, I'll see you ratbags later.